it took me a very, very long time to tell somebody that I run a dog leash nonprofit. Our motto is it's not about the leash. And I think some of that came out of, some of my ego. It's like, this is not what it's about. Bilateral brain stimulation is doing something right hand, left hand, right hand, left hand. You're actually increasing the oxygen in your brain and you're slowing down your amygdala.
Welcome to the UMGC podcast, Unstoppable Stories, with your host, Lauren Cardillo.
Today, I'm joined by Sharon Grassi, who is a corporate writer, designer, turned nonprofit leader, caregiver for her wounded son from the military. Sharon, I got to ask you, the first really important question is, how do you juggle all of that? I mean, you're going to school, you're helping him, you're doing other work with the nonprofit. What's your day like?
My day starts about 4 a.m. and it is juggling. There's multitasking. I think most caregivers, you're managing your own life and then you're also kind of managing someone else's life. And so there's this interconnectedness of what do I get to keep of me and what do I have to do for him? And it's a massive juggle. And I rarely do one thing at a time, which is not healthy. So there's always, when you talk to caregivers, we're always talking about, hey, are you slowing down to deal with your mental health and your mental wellness more likely? And that's a big one because we do over task.
How did you end up becoming a caregiver? I mean, you were in a corporate world doing, as you said, helping executives write, helping with design, and then you're thrust into a completely different world. How did that happen?
Early on, we go way back to 2005, my son joins the military. And as he went through the military, we saw little indications that what was going on, what was happening with him, was changing who he was, personality-wise, sleep function, all of those kind of things. Physically, he had quite a few concussions. And so as a mom, you just kind of go, okay, you do the whole rub some dirt on it and keep going. And that's kind of how the military, hey, you're good to go, keep going. And at one point, he attempted suicide while he was active duty. And that was about the point that I realized, well, this is no longer, let's rub some dirt on it and keep going. This is a point of advocacy. And that was in 2013. I kind of stepped in the day after and kicked kind of the mama bear mode in. I really had no idea that I was stepping into a caregiver world. I was just going mama bear. What's going on? How do we fix this? How do we keep you going? And that continued for about 2 years until he came out of the military in 2015. And we realized that he just was not, he had a lot of medical issues that need to be dealt with the VA. And I thought, okay, we have these all wrapped up and we just hand them to the VA and everything, they just take care of it. And we had a lot of help from the active duty side, people reaching out to the VA saying, hey, this is what this guy needs. And
what do you think brought on what, you said concussions, different things you could tell, but what do you think brought on his suicide, what he had to deal with it? Yeah.
Well, Derek got himself into some trouble right after his third deployment. He didn't do anything horrible, not violent, but he thought he was taking care of some of his guys and he ended up in the middle of something that went wrong. And he had a perfect, exemplary, multi-year time in the military. And he didn't understand how to process that. He didn't know how to deal with it. He expected that everybody would look at everything in the light of day and kind of okay, and we moved forward, and that wasn't happening. And he didn't know how to deal with it. He felt like he had let everybody down. He didn't know how to move forward. And he wasn't processing things right. I tried to, at the time that this was going on, I was trying to help him, and he said, "No, no, no, mom, it's okay. We've got this." And then when he realized, no, we don't have this, at some points there are things within the military that you are owned, this is how it goes, and that's what happened. And he just gave up. He just said, I don't need to be here anymore. And so that was the point that I stepped in and kind of said to the military, he is like your gun. So for Derek, if he didn't take care of his gun, he could get in trouble. So as commanders, I went to them and I said, look, he is your tool and you need to take care of him and I will hold you to it. And so that's how we proceeded. And that is how we connected more into the medical side of it. And the medical side of the active duty military went, whoa, wait a minute. This guy needs to be taken care of. He's had 3 deployments. He's had multiple concussions. He has PTSD that was diagnosed in 2007. We haven't done anything other than clean him up, dust him off, rub some dirt on it.
Right. It sounds like their version of rub some dirt on it.
Right. The military version of rub some dirt on it, put him back in the field because he's great at what he does. He was so good. He was a combat medic his first 4 years. He actually got out of the military for almost a year and then went back in as infantryman because he wasn't functioning well in the military or in the a non-active duty civilian.
Yeah, like society.
He didn't know how to function in society, and that's kind of where I step in once he came out. Was he really didn't do well functioning in society. He's great at supporting his veterans or his active duty military in a combat situation. Every single one of the guys I've ever talked to that were deployed with him were like, oh my gosh, this guy is great. And he can make you laugh in the middle of being fired on. It's like bullets are whizzing past. We're all laughing at something that Derek's doing. So yeah, he was just one of those guys that was always on, always taking care of somebody else, but he was not taking care of himself.
So you find yourself going to the VA with what you think are all these records and you think they have them, right? And what was your surprise?
Well, my surprise, he had been at Walter Reed and we had this beautiful package of like, he needs this and he needs neurosurgery. And they had it all in these concise, beautifully done little paragraphs. And this is the doctor and this is what they found. And this is what he needs. It was beautifully packaged. And I thought they had that. And along with all of his medical records, because he's active duty and, all those medical records, I had a digital version of all of his medical records. So I assumed that they had that too. And when I realized the first thing that came up was that they started putting him in therapy and like physical therapy. And I went, how is this happening? He needs neurosurgery. Why are we doing this? Every time he goes to physical therapy, he's laying in a bed for 3 days in so much pain he can't handle it. So I'm talking to these medical providers while I'm also, at work. I was working corporate America. I had finished my bachelor's degree finally. It took me forever, but at 54, I finished my bachelor's degree. And so I'm now working at a higher level in corporate America. And I'm standing in hallways talking to medical providers at the VA because you can't talk about someone else's medical in a cubby world. It just doesn't work well.
Right.
And and so I started to realize that these medical providers had no idea what I was talking about.
And why was that? What was their?
They just had, well, one of the things, we'll talk a little tech now, Vista and Alta are the 2 systems within the VA for medical records, and they don't talk to each other. They don't.
Of course they don't.
And so we had these VA providers that had one system, and we had DoD providers that had another system. And it's something that the government has been telling them to fix for a very long time. but has not been fixed. Right now, I think they're transitioning to a new system, but I would love to go in and help them understand how it's that system's not going to work either, because their terminology from one system to another and their naming conventions and the way they bring documents in is just it's a mess. It's just not functional. You know, when you work in corporate world and you every document has a number and a dash and a and I can find a nut and a bolt out of a million assembly product in a heartbeat. But a provider at the VA could not find the records that told him that my son needed neurosurgery. So I had to hand carry documentation to them and say, here's the documentation. And if you need the digital copy, I will give you all the digital records.
I remember when we met last year, you said to me that at that point you became a not nice advocate. and
Well,
I think that's for a lot of women, that's uncomfortable. So how did you sort of turn on that little switch?
I think that switch for me turns on. I'm extremely happy to help someone understand what they're missing. And I think a lot of providers in the VA are once you talk to them about, hey, I have this document, you need this document, and they're willing to say what's going wrong, then it's a matter of like, oh, we're a little screwed up. I need your help. Absolutely. No problem. Let's work on this. It's those providers and especially the administrative end of it that were unwilling to say that there was a problem. They got the mama bear and they knew why they had the mama bear. At first, they tried to blame me as this crazy woman that was coming in and, oh, she just wants more than her son deserves. And some of them no longer work at the VA. And I might have been part of that decision. But it was really, yeah, as an individual, you hate to think that you have to go to that level to get someone to take care of a veteran.
Also necessary in this was for you to not do your corporate job anymore. And as you said, you put a pin in it. How did that feel? I mean, yes, of course you want to help your son, but you're also becoming a full-time advocate.
Right. Initially, it was like, I'm just going to tack this little piece of my life to the board. I'm just going to put a pin in it and I'm going to come back to that. And that was kind of the conversation my husband and I had. He was at a bigger stage in his career and I was very involved in what was going on with Derek. And we said, I'm just going to get the VA straightened out. And then I'll go back to work because I had taken student loans out to finish my degree. It was like me investing in me. And my kids, my younger children, were also going to college. So they had the parent loans. And so it was not going, it didn't seem to be an option of, oh, well, I'm going to quit work and stay home. That just wasn't something that was really on our radar. And then the longer it went and the more I realized that, you would give the VA a piece of paper and saying, hey, this is what needs to happen. And you think, oh, well, somebody's going to take that piece of paper and they're going to file it and they're going to revert back to it the next time they need it. No, no, that did not happen. So I would get things settled. And then another person would be in the situation at the VA that I had to deal with, another administrator. And I'd say, oh, well, it's that document that I gave you, 2 months ago. And they'd say, what document? And I don't see any record of ever dealing with this. And I'd go, oh, dear God. Oh, okay, let's start from, ground one, ground zero and now we'll get it fixed again, and please put this in so that we don't have to do it again. I've dealt with the same issues with the VA 3, 4, 5, 10 times on the same issue. So that again, their documentation, their ability to grasp and kind of coming from corporate world, you would say, process improvement. And again, I would love to go in and say, hey, let me just help a little.
Give me a contract. I can
I
fix
know,
this.
I can fix this. And then we wouldn't even need me to help, do some of this stuff with Derek.
Was there a point where you felt like regret or angry or jealous that you couldn't keep going with your career to make this happen?
Yeah, absolutely. There was a huge grief period for me on the loss of my career. I think I had been building what I thought was my career, my life, my trajectory since my early 20s. And I had given some of that up to raise children. And, you do those things. Okay, I'm going to take a break and I'm going to do what's right for my kids. I did not expect to be walking away from that career, from the financial stability of that career, from the ability to have, the dream vacations and have this thing that, this life that my husband and I had planned. Everything changed. Everything changed. Luckily, my husband was good about recognizing that, it's okay. We will just adjust. But yeah, it was many bouts of anger and difficulty getting through, loss of friendships, loss of career, loss of, this ability to connect with people because everything you're doing is completely changed and foreign than it had been prior. Where I could talk on a technical, enjoy talking technical to someone that I worked with in the past. Now I was in this medical field, and it was like, I don't really enjoy talking about medical issues. That's not my thing. So that was a huge adjustment.
So for those listening and watching, once again, you are watching Unstoppable Stories with our guest, Sharon Grassi. If you want to hear more stories like this, don't forget to like or subscribe. So going back to what you were just saying about you changing sort of what you were doing in life, how did you end up then developing a nonprofit? How did you end up with dog leashes, dogs? I mean, that was like a big left turn. Where did that come from? And how did it help?
Huge, huge left turn. When Derek was at Walter Reed, and because of the chaos that happened while he was active duty, he was at Walter Reed kind of at the end of his time in active duty, and he had zero money. And that's a whole huge other story, which the military had to deal with. But at the time, he just had nothing. And it was Christmas while he was at Walter Reed. And so he went to the BX and he bought some paracord, and we were at home training what was going to be his first service dog. She was beautiful, Echo, Great Pyrenees, massive, huge. And so he made this dog leash out of paracord and sent it home for a Christmas present for us. And it's basically the same leash that we make now, a few adjustments to make it a little bit stronger in places, but really it's pretty much the same leash, and it was really cool. We really liked the design, and when he came out of the military, a lot of people had been asking us about this leash we were using. And Derek couldn't work. He couldn't really do anything. And so we said, hey, Derek, let's make some leashes and we'll turn it into like this business for you. And we kind of built this business for him of the dog leashes, and people were buying them. And then we finally got the VA to recognize that he needed neurosurgery, and he had neurosurgery, and it was not a good neurosurgery. It was, he actually got worse than better. And he couldn't make dog leashes anymore. And so we had, as you can see behind me, not the same paracord, but we had just a ton of paracord that we had kind of thought, well, maybe this is going to be a cool thing. And he couldn't make leashes. And so I had all this paracord that sat for about 2 years while we were dealing with what are we doing and how do we do it. And I was in the middle of still trying to figure out, how do I go back to work? I tried a few times to go back to work, and employers just did not understand. I've had a couple of employers say, well, this is your adult son. What do you mean you need to help him? So that was really, again, difficult for me to realize I might not be able to go back to work, not because I can't work, but because employers don't understand what this is. And
Well, it's sort of invisible to them.
it really is. It really is. And you have these ideas in your head of like, this is an older woman coming to work for us. Of course, she's not going to be having babies, and she doesn't need to, take these breaks that the younger women have. And they didn't realize, oh, no, she's a caregiver of a disabled veteran, and she will need to maybe work from home, which was totally possible, but not in their eyes. So, anyways, that was about the time that I started reaching out and looking for my community, my tribe. And I found the Elizabeth Dole Foundation, and I became an Elizabeth Dole Fellow. Kind of, I guess they saw in me something that I really wasn't ready to see in myself, but it was more of um, a need to find other caregivers in my area. We just did not have a good group that was coming
So
together.
they saw that you had the initiative and the energy, but wanted to connect you?
Yes. I think there was, I mean, I did apply. It wasn't like they said, hey, you should be a fellow.
Hey, you.
But I saw the need to kind of do more. And again, I was trying to go back to work. I was trying to take the pin out and say, no, 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 I'm still over here. This is my life way over here. Can I still have it? And so I was trying to find something too. I was trying to find, who am I still? I'm not ready to just be one of the crowd. I still want to give back. I still want to be productive. And so it was in that time that I was connecting with other caregivers, and we were trying to figure out what to do. And we have a couple of caregivers that still laugh at the fact that we tried bath bombs and we tried bracelets and we tried, what are we going to do together? And one of them said, aren't you making dog leashes at home to give to veterans? Because I was trying to get rid of the paracord. And and I said, well, yeah, but do you guys really want to do that? And they said, yeah, yeah. So I brought paracord in, and it was a huge catalyst for caregivers who didn't know how to sit together and just have a conversation. All of a sudden, we were all sitting at the table, and some were listening and some were talking, and everybody was getting happy. And they were really excited about being able to give these leashes to the veterans. I know somebody that has a dog that's a veteran, and, you had all of these stories that started coming out about who they wanted to give them to. And that's kind of the trajectory we went down. And then we ran out of paracord.
You're like, I'm done here, right?
My work is done. And they wanted to continue. And I said, well, do we have to transition it to a nonprofit so that we can, make this continue? Because I'm not footing the bill for this. And we did. It took quite a while, but some of the caregivers that were there stepped in and helped to transition it. And yeah, that's where I went from corporate America to dog leashes, which was a huge ego thing for me too. I had a really, really hard time with that. It took me a very, very long time to tell somebody that I run a dog leash nonprofit. And our motto is, it's not about the leash. And I think some of that came out of, some of my ego. It's like, this is not what it's about. It really isn't. It's not what it's
Well,
about.
I remember you telling me when we met that there were two things that that happened when people made dog leashes. Once it was the whole coordination thing, which
Yes.
was fascinating, but also people who weren't going to talk. Once you sat them down to make a dog leash, they had things to say.
Yeah, it really is interesting. The coordination thing is bilateral brain stimulation, which again, we didn't really understand. Everything kind of came to us as we were making dog leashes. That thing that we all felt as caregivers that helped us sit down at the table Bilateral brain stimulation is doing something right hand, left hand, right hand, left hand. You're actually increasing the oxygen in your brain and you're slowing down your amygdala. And so as you're making a dog leash, you're actually changing the brain chemistry, which gives you kind of this ability to not be so stressed. You reduce that fight or flight and you can just kind of hang out and listen. And so that was from those early days, all of the caregivers said, I don't know why, but it's kind of zen like making a dog leash. And we all went, oh yeah, that's kind of cool. But it really was this real physical change that was happening us that made it okay to just sit there and listen to somebody and be okay with it and kind of be happier about it at the end and not be stressed.
What does your son think of this? The fact that you've started this nonprofit that started with his dog.
Yeah. Every time something grows with the nonprofit, he really is proud of what has come out of this. He's surprised, I think, especially the first couple of years when I would say, "Hey, we're going to, continue with this as a nonprofit." And he kind of go, "Really? Okay, that's cool." Um, and the events that we have, he's like one of the best examples for the community members that join. He comes in and just is there. He's present. And prior to having events like that, he would have hovered on the outside. He never would have walked into um, an American Legion or a VFW or an event where there was a crowd of people and said hi or come in with his dog. It just was not in his wheelhouse to do that after with the TBI and the PTSD, he would hover on the outside of communities. So the first time that he walked into an American Legion, the people that were making dog leashes, which were veterans and community members, they were like, "Oh, hi, that's your son." And I said, "No, this is the first time he's ever walked into an American Legion." And these guys just like, "I don't understand. Why would he not be okay?" And they went over and talked to him and talked about the military and talked about his dog. And they were just so accommodating and kind. And they are now starting to realize that there is a disconnect for some veterans in not knowing how to walk into a crowd. Um, when they walk when they walk in and say, "Well, I'm just here to make dog leashes," all of a sudden that's not weird. If they walk into an American Legion and nothing is going on and they're just there, in their minds and in everybody in that crowd might kind of go, "Oh, why is he here?" But we kind of take that away, and that's been a huge growth. And for him, he sees that, and he's the ultimate caregiver to himself as a former medic. So for him to see that, hey, this is really helping other veterans kind of walk into community and feel comfortable, and that he's really proud about that.
How does that make you feel when you see how far he's come,
Oh,
from
huge.
those moments?
Huge, huge. One of the things for me is my concern. What happens, I'm a parent caregiver, I'm older. So what happens when I die? You know, will he be able to connect with others? Will he isolate to a point where he's just going to, you know, take his own life again and succeed next time? And so that's always a concern for us is that we want others to be part of his community. And we want, that same thing for other veterans. We have, the issue with veteran suicide. And a lot of that is veterans that don't know how to step into community, don't know how to participate, don't have a tool to do that. And we see a lot of veterans, especially women veterans. Oh my gosh, we have a ton of women veterans that come into a lot of our events where a lot of times they just don't feel comfortable walking into a crowd but they seem to feel really comfortable walking in and making a bunch of dog leashes. And so that's been really cool to see. Yeah, it's just always a really big surprise to see the people that come in and enjoy being a participant.
How many do you think you've made by this point? And do you have one you can show us?
Oh my gosh, I think we've probably made about 2,000 leashes because we tend to make somewhere between 4 and 500 a year, and we've been doing this for quite a few years, maybe more than that. Oh, I haven't
Do you
told.
have one hanging around there?
Uh, let me see. I have a couple back here.
There you go.
Yeah, let me see. Let's see if you can see.
Oh, how
Yeah,
pretty. I
yeah,
love it.
those are our dog leashes. So double handled. This is exactly how it was made. Not exactly. I mean, it's a little stronger right here. We have two handles. Yep. So and uh paracord. So this is the same kind of a knot that the military uses, which is why Derek chose this knot um for a survival bracelet. So if you this is about 70 feet of paracord. So if you had this leash in your car and you got stuck somewhere, this is 550 paracord and you could survive. It would be maybe something on Naked and Afraid that somebody would say, "Hey, I want paracord." You can actually use it. So it's one of those things. It's a survival mechanism. It's tied to the military. Even the name, co-op survival, a cooperator in the military, somebody that helps the military survive. They're connecting and cooperating um, in the civilian world. So we're kind of, crossing into those transitions. In the civilian world, co-op survival is a gaming term. And it means it's a group of individuals that really don't have a whole lot of connection to each other that are helping each other through difficult transitions. So, and Derek actually chose the name. Actually, he wanted co-op tactical, and I went, no, it's survival cord, so let's do this. And he went, okay. So, and at that time he said, oh, well, but that's a gaming term. And I looked it up and I went, Derek, that's a perfect gaming term. So, yeah, it actually fits exactly what we're doing.
You put a pin in it,
Yeah.
and then you find out there's a scholarship where you can get a master's in your whatever field, in your case, strategic communications. And all of a sudden, that thing you put a pin in it doesn't have a pin anymore. I mean, how did that sort of happen for you that now you're going down a different career path?
Right. Well, I had known slightly about the scholarship through the Elizabeth Dole Foundation for a few years. But we had the college loans hanging over our head. And I told my husband, I am not going to go back to college until we can get rid of these college loans. And we were very, very focused over the last couple of years. I did a lot of work with the Dole Foundation on financial wellness. And there's not a lot of financial wellness for the older generation. It's like just pay everything off and, try to not spend. And so that's what we were doing. And about a week before the deadline for this round that I applied for of the Village of Strength, we finished paying off the last student loan. And someone from the Dole Foundation, one of the staff members, did a last ditch, hey, you guys, there's 5 days left, to apply. And it hit my email and I went, I could go back to college. I could actually do this. And I had already made this commitment to myself that I was going to really dive into the nonprofit and I was going to do the things that I wanted to do for work, for the corporate world. I was going to do that for the nonprofit. And so when I looked at the college degree programs and I went, oh, communications, strategic communications. Yeah, that fits what we do. Because we also do retreats for caregivers and we work on communication skills. We work on pulling the pin out and talking about it and how do we move forward. And I thought, oh my gosh, how hypocritical if I'm offered an option to move forward and I don't take it. So I applied and I reached out to Pillars of Strength and I said, I'm applying, but I know I have 5 days left. So, just bear with me. I'm going to throw this out. But I'm a technical writer, so I might be able to kind of throw some stuff together. And I did. And they were so good to work with. They were so kind. And they were so good about, just get this done. Don't worry about this piece. Worry about this piece and get it to us, and we'll do what we can. And so that's what I did. And then just kind of closed it up and said, what will be, will be. And here I am, and loving and hating some of the minutes because, a master's program is a little difficult, but it's been so wonderful at each step to pick up some of the things and apply them to what we do and apply them to some of the communications that I have within the VA and other organizations that I can see is I'm in the right place. I'm grateful to be in the right place. It's wonderful.
So you're doing UMGC classes online. This semester, is there something that makes you go, this is really exciting, or you're dreading it?
I think every semester has been something that I absolutely dread. And no, really, every semester, the content, it has been so insightful. Even for me to understand, like, social identity is something that comes up. You're studying theories of communication. And I think for caregivers, we lose our social identity. We have this social network that we've built. And that's when you put the pin in it and go, I will come back to this. I will, I will be able to, maintain my social circle, my social identity, my work identity, my home identity. I'll be able to go back to that. And by the time you go back, it's like, everybody has moved on, things have changed, you just can't reclaim that. And so I think in the classes that I've had, it's really, really interesting to see how that communication piece ties in, how understanding that helps others understand how we can regain and be okay with the next social identity and move on.
How is your son doing now, and how does he feel about what you're doing?
Yeah. Well, with someone with PTSD and TBI, there's always positives and negatives. We just went through another bout where he had some medication changes, and we dealt with an assisted or an attempted suicide again. It was a difficult thing, especially in a very difficult semester. But I knew that if I quit what I was doing, he would feel guilty. He would feel so guilty because he's so proud of what we're doing, how I'm moving forward, how we change as a family and we continue to grow and to kind of try to make this the best that we can. And he knows that I've lost some of the things that I wanted, but they've transitioned into things that I didn't know I wanted. And so I think he's really proud of that. I know he's really proud of that. I know that he enjoys and is very supportive of the things that I do. So I'm, absolutely wonderfully grateful to his support, my husband's support, in this stage of life that I never expected at my age to be doing this. But yeah, I'm extremely happy and for all the support.
When this all first started, sort of the idea of you're screaming and no one's listening, you've now sort of evolved from that. What advice would you give to someone who's new to this and has that same feeling?
Right. I think we're all so different in the position that we're at when we start to realize that we're advocating for someone. And in my situation, I didn't even know the words to use, the people to connect with. Um, And it did. It felt like I was standing in a cavernous airport hangar and screaming, and either nobody knew what I was saying or nobody was there. And it was very, very difficult to know where to turn. Um, and so I think for others, when you're first starting out, I think, you know, it's so important to find your tribe. But even before that, it's really important to just kind of really grasp what is it you need? What are you looking for? What kind of help do you need? Because once you find your tribe and you just stand there going, I don't know what I need. I don't really kind of taking a moment to yourself and knowing what am I trying to do? In those first few years, I made so many bad decisions. Um, so many times where I just didn't know who to connect with. So sometimes it's coming into a tribe and saying, how do I ask about this doctor? How do I find out about this doctor? How do I get this medical record? How do I do? And I think as you're slowly just focusing on what do I need? What do I need? You start realizing who is your tribe, who is there for you, who is connecting, and who isn't. It's sad to see the the people that fall away in those situations, but it's really, really wonderful to see, um, who becomes a member of your team, who's there no matter what, who can handle that call. And again, I can't say enough about the Elizabeth Dole Foundation because sometimes those questions come at 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. and there are portals and social media platforms that are within the Elizabeth Dole Foundation that at 2 a.m. I can put something out and I get an answer. I probably get 4 or 5 answers. And so it's really, really important to start having that kind of response and support, and then finding those tribes and defining what you need beyond that for your mental well-being, because you will take on this multitasking extravaganza that you never thought you would be able to handle. And so you need to know when to stop, when you have to stop in that.
Thanks so much, Sharon. We loved having you and really loved you sharing your stories. They were inspiring and just, it's a slice of a world that many of us don't see. So thank you. And for everybody listening and watching, please remember to like and subscribe if you want to hear more unstoppable stories on your favorite podcast platform. Until next time, thank you so much. Thank you, Sharon.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.